Hey y'all, Zach McDonald, your real estate agent with Real Property Associates, and this is my Seattle real estate market update for May 2024. I'm glad to be back with you guys after taking a week off. Unfortunately, I was just terribly under the weather last week, but feeling better. Not quite 100%, almost there. I've got the cast off, which is lovely. And we get to talk about the monthly stats, which honestly is my favorite data to look at. I do like the week over week data as well. So I know some of you have really appreciated the weekly market updates and not just the monthly market updates. But these ones are my favorites. They're the original one that I started making, 6-7 years ago. I can't exactly remember, but it's been a while now since I've been making these. So excited to share a little bit about what's going on in the market here over the past month in the Seattle and Bellevue areas. So let's start off with mortgage rates today. So mortgage rates as of today on Mortgage News Daily's website, 7.11%. So we've been hovering low upper sixes, low sevens pretty much all year. There was a lot of hope that by now we'd start to see rates coming down, and really they've come down a little bit, but not at all from the beginning of the year. In fact, they're up from where they were starting out the year. Interestingly, though, the prices have kept moving. So shifting over here to median sales price, Seattle's median sales price last month was $953,000, up 9% year over year. So last year, $875,000. If we look back though at 2022, $996,000. So a little down from the 2022 high still. Bellevue though, $1.9 million is down 4.5% from last year at $1.99 million, and up though from 2022. So Bellevue's highest median sales price in 2022 was actually what would have been March 2022. So prices had already started to come down a little bit in Bellevue in 2022 at this point. But really, we're seeing that prices have recovered, or at least mostly recovered back to their 2022 highs. Not quite there, but close. But interest rates are still high. So even with the higher interest rate environment, and even substantially higher than where they were in 2022, we're seeing that the home values have been climbing. And I guess the big question that everybody has is why? And we've talked about that over the past few months, and we talk about that every single week, at least to some degree, about why the housing market continues to be hot here in Seattle. And a big factor is the supply. So supply is a huge piece of the puzzle. There just are not enough houses out there on the market for all of the buyers, which puts a lot of pressure on the houses that are out there. You have multiple offers. That drives essentially competition, pushing prices up. The other factor is that people are returning to the market. So there were fewer buyers last year than there were this year so far, and we're seeing that people are coming back to the market. And even though we are seeing an uptick in inventory here, we're seeing an uptick in buyers too. So let's look at closed sales. We had 3.1% more closed sales here in Seattle year over year, 50% more though in Bellevue. And if we look at numbers, barely more in Seattle than we had in Seattle last year, but substantially lower still from 2022. And Bellevue is quite a bit higher than last year, but still, again, pretty low in comparison to 2022 as far as the closed sales go. But what we're seeing is things are starting to pick up. And one of the metrics here is the days on market. So median days on market in Seattle and Bellevue, 6 and 5. So that means, we're seeing quite a few houses coming off the market fairly quickly. The average still is higher though. So the average in Seattle, 16 days on market, and Bellevue, 12 days on market. So I think, in my opinion, the median days on market is a better stat for the time on market because you remove the outliers, right? There are houses that are going to sell super fast, and there are going to be houses that sell in a lot more time on the market. But then you have the median numbers, the middle number. So you're crossing off those extremes. So I like the average here in a sense because it gives you, a feeling for where some of those outliers are. But the closer that average and median get to each other, the more you can say in general, everything is selling quickly. But as we see some of those longer on market homes, days on market homes coming off the market, we start to see this average creeping closer to the median, meaning like a lot of these houses are selling quickly. And 16 and 12 is considerably lower than what we were seeing last year and getting closer to what we were seeing in 2022. We saw 9 and 5 days on market in 2022 for the average there. Now, the list price percentage, this is one where I like to see the average versus the median because you are capturing some of those higher houses, right? Higher percentages over asking price. Now, not all houses are selling over asking price in Seattle or Bellevue, but there are a substantial amount of houses pushing the prices above the asking price. So here, average in Seattle, 3.4% above list price in April. In Bellevue, we saw 5.5% above asking price. In both cases, that was better than in 2023. The market was slower in 2023, but relatively competitive given everything on the table last year. Still above asking price in both cases, but not as dramatically. Now, if we were to look back at 2022, we were pushing 10% in Seattle and even over that in Bellevue. And let's shift over to what's coming up. So new listings. I always like to see, how many listings are coming on. 29.4% uptick in Seattle, 36.4% uptick in Bellevue for new listings, which is good. We need some more new listings. And if we look at the new listings in Seattle, still quite a bit lower. We're still 50 or so lower in Seattle for new listings from 2022. And in Bellevue, 25, it looks like here. But quite a good jump from last year. So things are starting to get back to normal a little bit. At the same time as the new listings are picking up, we also see that pending sales are picking up in Seattle and Bellevue as well. So 28.2% jump in Seattle for pending sales and 41.2% jump in Bellevue. And again, we're not all the way back to all-time highs in pending sales by any means. Actually, 2021 was quite a bit bigger year than 2022 for the pending sale activity, and so was 2020 for that matter. But we're starting to see that the pending sales numbers are also approaching those 2022 numbers. So as the amount of new listings is increasing, so is the buyer activity to meet it, and that is why it's staying competitive. All of this brings us back to the conversation around inventory and supply. And if we look at Seattle, 4.8% up year over year as far as homes for sale. Bellevue down 17.3%. We're not talking about a lot of houses in Bellevue here. In Seattle, we aren't talking about a ton of houses either, but it's interesting to see that, as we talked about, the amount of buyers pending sales is keeping up with the new listing. So we're not seeing a big buildup of inventory. And that's what would cause the competition to go down and for those downward pressure on the pricing. But we're not seeing that. And that's why we're seeing, if we look at the monthly supply numbers, based on pending sales, 1.5 month of supply in Seattle, 15.4% higher than last year. Interesting little tidbit. I don't think it matters too much because we're actually seeing things selling for more than we were last year. But we are seeing a little bit more supply. It's typical to see that in the spring, and it's encouraging to see that. Last year, we didn't see enough supply for the whole year, and we're starting to see those numbers picking up. But again, 1.5 months of supply is really low. It's not hyper low, but it's still really low. And Bellevue, 1.1 months of supply, down a little bit from last year. Both cases are still what we would consider a seller's market, where the seller has the advantage in negotiations. There's just not enough houses out there, and buyers are generally competing for the houses that are available. And all of this brings us to, what the heck does this actually mean, right? It's one thing to talk about the data, recite the stats, but what does it mean for buyers and sellers? And right now, buyers need to know that it is increasingly more expensive to buy a house. So not only have prices been going up, but mortgage rates are up and they are staying up. So mortgage rates have not come down yet, and prices have pretty much gone back up to where they were in 2022. So not only now do you have the higher prices, but you also have the higher rates. And that's something that I mentioned was going to happen, that we were going to see prices coming up, and eventually it doesn't feel very good, right? To now have the higher rates and the higher prices. And we had the higher rates with lower prices, which would have been an opportunity for buyers. And now we're pretty much back to where we were. At the same time, it's interesting to think through that we're seeing this jump in prices even with the higher rates. And I think a lot of that is speculative, that people think, man, things are getting better, or they will get better on the interest rate front. And then once they do, prices are going to take off. So will it get more expensive to buy a house in Seattle? And the answer is yes, it will. And same with Bellevue. Interest rates are a huge factor. And the fact that they aren't playing a massive factor right now is interesting, but that just tells us that it's going to get really competitive. If it's competitive now, it's going to get really competitive when interest rates start coming down a little bit. So I still think there's an opportunity for buyers, but it's not as good as it was. For sellers, I think if you're somebody who needs to sell right now, you're in good shape. You're in a position to expose your listing to buyers that are looking to buy something with some competition. So that's always a good thing when you have people fighting over your house. I think at the same time, though, if you're not in a rush to move, what I would say is this: I wouldn't speed up my plans to sell and do it right now versus maybe continuing to hold out. So if you want to move right now, perfect. You're in a great spot to do that. You're going to get a good price for your house. If you aren't necessarily planning for it right now, but you could, and maybe your goal is to sell in the next year or two. Maybe you have a rental, or maybe you've got a second home, or maybe you're just thinking about relocating. If you go ahead and do the relocation, great, do it, then make the sale. But if you're selling just to sell, I would say, if you can hold on a little bit longer, you're probably going to see a benefit here in the prices. So just some thoughts as we wrap up this market update. We're seeing some encouraging trends, at least for the general market, that the market is recovering, prices are recovering, even with the higher rates. For buyers, that's not necessarily encouraging. So I appreciate on the buyer side, it is not what you want to see. You don't want to see higher rates and higher prices. That's not ever a good sign. But in terms of the general health of the housing market, I think it's good on that front. So things are recovering here in the Seattle area. We are seeing some talk and speculation that we're still going to see those rates dropping, but when that's going to happen seems like an elusive conversation. So we can keep guessing. Maybe it's later this year, maybe it's early next year, but it is coming down the pipe. Some people are starting to say maybe it's going to be like this for a few years, and it might. But at the same time, we're seeing that the housing prices are continuing to climb here in the Seattle area despite all of the odds. Thanks so much for watching this month's Seattle real estate market update. If you made it to the end, I know you got some value out of this video, so please consider subscribing. And if you know somebody who could benefit from this information, please share it with them.